Well, it's so great to be back here. To talk about more on the imposter part two. Kim can't be with us today, but I have Valencia Benavides is here. So,
Hi,
and
thanks for
we
having
are,
me.
yeah, we had a pretty intense time last
We did.
night with our group, the gathering of women, and through Waking Up Gray. And I was when you're walking in community and you're building community, if you stay in the process, things can get intense sometimes. And that's when you kind of hit breakthroughs and all that you're not living in a surfacey. Now you're going pretty deep. And I feel like in chapter 4 of this Waking Up Gray book and dealing with the imposter is taking us to a deep place. And it definitely brought up a lot of great conversations last night and
Yeah.
some intense conversations, but I believe was necessary. And I feel like God is revealing more about our imposters, right?
Yeah.
And I think for the thing that even that prior to that, as I'm also finishing up, not finishing up, in the middle of writing my book, but in the middle of that, I'm talking about identity and stuff too. And something that I had this revelation is that because of traumas and stuff and what I walked through as a child, I had disassociated a lot. I was diagnosed borderline schizophrenic and stuff like that. But I think I've realized that as I was going through that and when the Lord brought me through a lot of healing, I would think most people are probably have disassociated one way or another
Yeah.
who've been through any type of trauma. Because you have to, especially if a child, you don't know how to process that because your brain's not developed enough to even figure that out. And I think, thank goodness, because I think it's a gift from the Lord that we are able to move forward and not go into total disarray. Some people do, though.
Yeah.
But when you bring Jesus on the scene, there's healing that can happen, and we can be um, kind of face up to those things. But I thought it was interesting that the conversations we had, and
Yeah.
then Valencia, you shared part of your letter to yourself. Is that?
Yeah. To my imposter.
Mm-hmm.
Which was it was a process just getting to that place. Because I feel like I shared last week that I think for me, a lot of it is like striving and self-sufficiency and things like that. And so it doesn't feel as obvious, maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that it has created issues in my life. And so yesterday I had been praying about it for weeks
Mm-hmm.
and thinking it over. And I had even reached out to some friends that had known me for a really long time too, to just because there's places that you don't remember, right, when you're much younger. Um, and just trying to remember, okay, was there like a defining moment where I changed, or, are there things that are so like clearly rooted in who I am that have been consistent through time, and then comparing that with where I am now, like are there things that are contradicting the other? And so I was just
Mm-hmm.
looking at that, and it was interesting to see what I heard, but I ultimately it didn't really resolve anything per se until I really just sat down in the presence of God and said, "Okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to write this, and I don't know what this is going to look like,
Mm-hmm.
but you're going to show me." So that's what I did, and I was really emotional sharing it, so I'm going to share it today, and hopefully I get through this in a way that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to stumble too much. So, um, here it goes. Well, imposter, you're quite a master of hide and seek. I've suspected your presence for a while now, but you slip from my grasp so easily. In a society that prizes so highly those ideals of striving, gumption, stick to itiveness, you're quite camouflaged. All hail the bootstrappers, all hail the self sufficient. Oh, true, there is such value in all those things, making it oh so hard to pin you down. Come on, dear child. There is safety here. No need to dart for the hiding places of the shadows. I know you might feel a little uncertain of my intentions with you. I know you've felt the critical gaze of my introspection pass your way more recently. How about we sit together a bit and rest? I know you're so very tired. All the spinning of busyness and duty laced with perfectionism have exhausted you. Even as I've begun to let things ride, so that some stillness can enter our lives. You can't seem to get fully comfortable in it. You still notice all that's askew, and their mockery shames you. As God has tried to disentangle you, the fear of doing the wrong thing during your reformation has left you feeling numb and paralyzed. All that striving and pushing through and gripping as you've tried to be the glue in your life, in your family's lives, has sucked you dry. You've cycled from bitterness and anger to numbness and back again, and the pieces started to fall at a rate you couldn't keep up with anymore. So much heartbreak for you, little one, as you've watched so many dreams pass by, delay upon delay, an attempt to tidy the chaos with a hopeful sweeping of pieces just to have the next wave throw it into chaos again. Hope deferred, and with it a heart that's been sick, hardened at times for protection. I know your intentions were good. You've helped me through many tough seasons, and I'm thankful for your ability to carry on in the face of challenges, big and small. Come sit in my lap, and let's find a way back to balance, okay? It's actually not about us at all. It's about him, Jesus, and surrender. I know that feels crazy, out of control, and scary, but there's freedom, peace, and rest there. And guess what else is there? Joy. Let's go together. You want to? It will be like the best party ever, a feast for our souls. You know you love a party. The table is loaded with the finest fare, with the most beautiful dishes and fabulous presentation, and loads of amazing people gathered together. The best part is there's no cleanup because it's eternal. Let's take long walks, wander at the light through the trees, and gaze at amazing sunsets. Let's bask in the beauty of his presence. Let's drink deeply to overflow. Let's let it spill and spread over our whole life until we are painting, gluing, stitching, etching, playing, spraying, building, imagining, dreaming, smiling, laughing, singing, and running this race until light has invaded the darkness and every reaching hand has been anchored to the one who saves.
It's so good. I love it. And can you share, like, when you said you had a vision of yourself, right?
Yeah, so probably I just kind of committed to sit down and write the first sentence, really. And I didn't really know what was going to happen after that because I felt like my thoughts were kind of muddled on it all. Probably because I was fighting through, like, I didn't want to screw it up. So that's the whole problem. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so I was fighting through that. And so when I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the hide and seek, I got like this glimpse of my little girl self, like running from me,
like running away from
me. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't see her face, but I knew that it was me. I saw her from behind, and she like ran past like my field of view, like she was hiding. And then I think that kind of clarified how I needed to approach my imposter. Because I think some of the examples that were given in the book didn't have that same candor with their imposter. Like some of it was sort of like humorous, poking fun at it, or being like a little bit like taunting the imposter a little bit. And whatever that was them working through their feelings about it all. For me, I think I got a lot of clarity on where it even, maybe just even the root of it. Because once I saw that, I thought, okay, the problem is like a little girl who's trying to gain control. Right. And I just pictured my daughter, and then I knew what I needed to say. So that's where it came from.
That's so powerful. And how the Lord uses that. It's like, and the imposter, the thing that, it's not about shaming that imposter. It's not about, it's embracing that imposter and saying that still is where I'm at. That's where I've been. And I need to hold and embrace her and love her, right?
Yeah.
And then allow Jesus to come in to bring healing. And that's when the healing begins. Not to say that it's not there,
Yeah.
to deny, right?
Right. And I think that we talked about that a little bit
Mm-hmm.
in the group last night. It was really interesting where that we ended up going from there, because
Mm-hmm.
we were saying so much of the time when someone comes um, to Christ, they pray the prayer of salvation. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the ladies was saying, she's been through like disciple leadership programs and things like that. And
Many
to
years, yeah.
lead people in those situations. And she said, it's just wild, because it's kind of like you say, okay, well, you're a new creation, and so moving on, and we don't address those other things,
Mm-hmm.
so we kind of just act like it didn't happen. And I will just, like, a caveat is that I do think that there are some people who have like really intense transformation stories, and
Yes.
they hit a place of salvation, and that I feel like sometimes when it's tied to their ministry, as like they just have a full on transformation and it's instantaneous. I mean, God can do that, but for most people, it's a working out of your faith, and a lot of that I think does require stepping through your baggage,
Mm-hmm.
unpacking things, and bringing healing to those imposter selves.
And
Um,
there is a scripture that talks about that we take back the ground little by
yeah,
little.
yeah,
And I remember asking the Lord, why is it taking so long? And it's like for each stage of each season of life and things that were shut down when we were children, whatever it is, it's because of those belief systems. If he, like when I've been through so much healing, but it's like I wasn't ready for that.
yeah,
He lays a foundation and groundwork where your trust, like I trust the Lord explicitly now. Like there's no, but back then because I was ritually abused, I had a hard. It took me a long time to know the Father,
yeah,
and it's like it just because of my perceptions of that, and so it's like the Lord was gently bringing me to that place where I could see him for who he really was. But I had blocked it so much because of what I had seen in my own situation, my own experiences.
right,
So
yeah,
it builds a distrust. And so it's like, well, like when we're at that point, but it's little by little. And he's given me the scriptures little by little.
hmm,
And it's just like you weren't ready. Now you're ready. You're older now. There's more truth that has been implanted in your heart and
hmm,
within you that you can take it. Just and I have to tell you, even last night, because some things that were said to me, um, in the past, I would have taken it
hmm,
very personally. And they weren't bad, y'all. I'm just gonna tell you it wasn't. But
yeah,
for me, it's showing me how far I've come and not being shut down. I would have shut down.
yeah,
And uh, and I think the Lord gave me the the voice to be able to speak out myself too of where I've come from. And when you've come out where your voice was silenced for so many years,
hmm,
and you finally find your own voice, and it might, and because we all have different grids, all
hmm,
have different personalities,
yeah,
and to say that one is better than others is not true,
right,
like, yeah, the fruits of the spirit are absolutely,
yeah,
but we don't know the intentions of everybody's heart.
right,
And somebody having passion, I've even learned this with my own daughter, like when somebody has passion and they can be passionate about something,
yeah,
and it doesn't mean that they're wrong in that,
yeah,
or that they're wanting to harm you.
right,
Right. So it's like, so that there's that whole um but it also learns that you need to be aware of other people, of
yeah,
how you are respond, right? And to ask the questions,
right,
like, what do you mean by that, or whatever it is, um but it's kind of amazing that the imposter can be too, that where you can go from one, like I've seen that happen, where you have when you've been totally shut down, then you come out where you're, and I feel like this is in some of the things that are happening, like especially for the gay community, where they were totally shut down and shamed, and now they're totally on the other spectrum, right?
Like
And,
you're going from extremes.
and now they're gonna, they're gonna put you down and make you feel bad.
Yeah.
If you say anything about it, you can't have a conversation about it. And the whole thing that I
Well,
feel
it's like a hope to regain
Yes.
their power, right? Or I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people do it about all different things,
Yes.
right? Like the attempt. It's kind of like how they say like abused people sometimes become abusers. It's
Yep.
like it's what are you gonna do with, like, what's your coping mechanism
Right.
gonna be?
I got to fight for myself, right?
Exactly.
The self-sufficiency
But then
comes
you
out real
go
strong.
way
Yeah.
far onto
Yeah.
the other side where you yourself are not necessarily being kind or whatever to other people. So yeah, absolutely. But I was super impressed because we did have some kind of hard conversations come up, and feelings. And I think it was just a working through.
Yeah.
We're all very much involved in like dissecting our imposter right now. And it has been really hard to even get to that place.
Yeah.
I think everybody has run into a lot of roadblocks, but like you said, we take back ground. And so I think that's what this is as you take back ground, you're like bumping into those things, and those things don't really want to like give that ground back. And so not without a fight, right? And so, but it was amazing to watch because
it was powerful.
everybody stayed in it.
Yes.
And everybody talked through it.
Yes.
And everybody held on to their voice.
Yes. That was so.
Everybody held on to their voice.
I saw two of women in a group who I've never heard. Like I saw them come alive. Like where I heard their voice so clear, and what they had to say was powerful, right? Like, I mean, it was so awesome to see happen. Like, I felt like we got to experience even more transformation where they got their voice back.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah.
And that they felt strong enough to be able to, I mean, like.
It elicited a strong response.
Yes.
And people were protective of self and each other. It was honestly like pretty amazing to watch. It was there were some tense moments, but everybody walked it out together. And I think we all left, everybody kind of understood, okay, we are all for each other. Everybody has different approaches. We can be more sensitive so that we know, you know, but we also have to be able to trust each other to be honest, to move through the hard places, because everybody's goal in that group is absolutely to grow. That is everybody's intention. And they're willing to have the hard conversations, clearly. And they were willing to have
and to
courage and to say what they needed to say, even though it was really uncomfortable for some of the people to do that, because it is not in their typical flesh, right? Their typical flesh really does not handle that well.
Where
but
have
they
you been?
did.
Yeah. And where have we been in a situation like, or even with groups of people, or even in the church too, where you can have those conversations,
right,
without being shut down?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and people did share stories of where, it did happen that way, like where you get ostracized or something.
And that happens too.
Yeah.
So there's a responsibility on both sides of that conversation to be able to stay in it together, that somebody doesn't cut and run and that somebody else doesn't just squash you. I mean, there has to be both things happening for it to be healthy, and to resolve it in a place, like get to that place of resolution where you're actually, everybody's okay. Feathers have been smoothed. Everybody's all right.
Yeah.
And everybody comes away like, hey, I just stood up for myself and I said what I needed to say. And then everybody's like, oh, okay. Everybody feels validated. Everybody's been heard. And everybody is also okay with each other. So that was pretty awesome. And we talked a little bit about, like we were saying earlier, that conversion, those conversion moments where people are just kind of left to leave that in the background, and we don't ever address those things. So then healing doesn't happen in that space. And we were saying there really needs to be, like, what is actual discipleship? And we even looked that up, and we're looking at, like, it's really mentoring people. Like, so it's not just giving people a list of rules to go by. That really is more about like law and death. That it really is about like helping you. And it said living life with people. That
Together.
is what it is.
Yeah.
You have to live life. You have to be willing to get in the mud together. You have to be willing to have those muddy moments and to pull each other out together, and to get through it and get to the other side together. And that's not always the neat little packages. But the willingness to walk those things out together, I think, is like a huge thing that's missing.
Yeah.
in the church.
And not wanting to run. I mean, well, some people might be wanting to run. Like I said, in the past, I would have probably shut down and wanted to run, but because the enemy, and not because of but it was because what the enemy tells you. See, here it goes again. Whatever, you're being shut down again, right? But it that was more silent, and it was like the Lord saying, "Look at what's going on around here, and like see what's really going on here, right?"
Yeah.
And that and I think because when I was a young girl, I was very passionate too, and that was shut down at me too. And I could get up on stage. I used to write plays, all that kind of stuff, and then that was taken from me, right? So it's like as you go through stages of life, and you get to see that, and then when you've been shut down for so long, and then you start coming out again. And I think everyone in that space have been shut down, and we're all finding our voice again.
Yeah,
and making it a place where we can speak out. That makes me feel this way, like that seems really intense, whatever, without someone feeling shame. Like if they're starting to battle shame, well, let's talk through that.
Right.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have to be the same? No. No. But we
Yeah.
still need to be kind and respectful and
Yeah.
honoring, right? Know what is honor, and still believe the best, and that whatever needs to be worked out, God's going to work it out with them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So I just think, I mean, it just goes back to the fact that it's really, there's such a need which is why we're doing this.
Yes.
It's why we're talking about it and not just having our little bubble off to the side that we do
No.
as a group on Wednesday nights. That's why we're talking about it, because, our hope and our vision is that there will be a time where these groups are spreading out across the world, really.
I mean, that's our heart. That's our intention as we, those even who are listening, our intention is that we want to, if we come alongside or maybe even help encourage you, whatever, if you have groups of when you get together to go, you want to go to that next level, and it's maturing in Christ. Like really, what is the body of Christ really supposed to be like?
Yeah.
And we're the bride of Christ. So there's that whole covenant of marriage and stuff involved. And like when things get into the thick of it in the beginning, it's all, oh, this is great. And then you start getting into some intense things. It's like, are you going to run? You're going to stay in it. Right. And now I'm not talking about abuse,
Right.
But I think there's a group of us here now. There's accountability, even though I might be the leader, like I said, I'm here. I'm just like everyone else. I'm not better. I don't like when people don't put me up on a pedestal. Oh, you're this, you're that, and you have a strong personality, whatever. Whatever. It's still Christ.
Right.
It still is Jesus. And it's the humble, servant's heart leadership is what God is after.
Yeah.
Jesus came and served. He was the greatest leader of all, and he served.
Yeah.
He was the greatest servant of all too. And he humbled himself. And so as any leader, we are to humble ourselves. And when we come before people, it's like, that's where, real life happens.
Yeah. Well, because too, I think vulnerability, like as a leader, your vulnerability is going to absolutely change the atmosphere for everybody. It's an invitation, right?
Yeah.
It changes the atmosphere in those spaces where people feel like they can be vulnerable. And I think the reason why a lot of these mentorship things are not happening as they should be, like that's what discipleship really needs to look like, right? Is like the coming alongside, the living the day-to-day, to walking through the hard stuff. And I think a lot of times that's not happening in the way that it should, because people in leadership don't want to be dethroned.
Yeah.
They don't want you to know their dirt, because they don't want to be less than. They don't want to be called on the carpet about it. They don't whatever.
Yeah, I would say some.
Yeah.
Some.
No, I mean,
because that's been our training.
I think the broken places, why that's not working.
Right.
I think a lot of times the reason why is because people aren't willing to go there. Even if they're not consciously like hiding, I think imposters hide.
Yes, they do.
They do it very readily, right? I mean, that's just what happens. And so, and yeah, I do think that people have a heart. There are people who have a heart to lead differently.
Yep.
But I think the reason why there's such a need in the church at large, at least historically speaking, is that not everybody has been willing to go there themselves and be raw and be open and be vulnerable. And even,
no accountability
Yeah.
too, like the accountability of, and you have people who they might be accountable, but everybody's kind of like, can't say this or that. And that's what I believe that God's taking us through this whole thing with Waking Up Gray book too. And through, even through the scriptures, is that we're there for one another and having those hard conversations.
Yeah.
And being okay with having that, and not, thinking, oh, they think the worst of me, or what I mean? It's like, no, we're in this together, and it's just God's going to be with us because we're all different personalities, and it's not that we're not to become Jesus. We're to become like Jesus. We're not to become Jesus.
Right.
And we're all different, and it's to embrace the differences as well, and that it's okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to be like one another. We all have different gifts and talents and all that, but it's to spur each other on, for the kingdom of God, right? For His glory, and to say, how does that spark? And some people need to be more passionate and more loud and bold because of the warfare that we're in.
Yeah.
And some people need to be more the quiet. I look at even like with Kim, like, I love it when she's in the room because she brings so much peace.
Beautifully peaceful.
Peace is the gift that she brings to the. Not saying that nobody else does, and that we don't either. But I mean, but that's one of her strengths, right? And I love that. But anyway,
and it doesn't diminish her voice.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't at all.
No. Anyway, we're gonna keep this conversation going for next week. But great being here. Thank you all for.